Hello everyone, it's Cookie here. So today it is Tuesday, or no, it's Sunday. I don't know why I said it's Tuesday. November, oh my gosh, I'm living in the past. Right now it is Sunday, January 2nd. Yesterday, We Baby Bears officially premiered with not one episode, not two episodes, but 10 episodes. That's something I definitely didn't expect. Maybe it's because I was trying to avoid We Baby Bears spoilers, so I just didn't look up anything. Like even the theme song, I wanted to go in blind. Because of that, I thought there was only going to be one or two new episodes, so that's what would be the focus of the video and just my thoughts on the show. But because they showed 10 whole episodes, there's a lot more to talk about, I guess, but at the same time, I'm not really sure what I could say, really. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about every episode and give a quick recap and just my thoughts on the episode. I don't think I'm gonna have a lot to say on any of them, honestly. Well, a couple of them I really liked, but there are a couple of things I want to talk about before we get to the episodes. They showed episodes of We Baby Bears all day, and in between the breaks of each episode, you know how they do commercials and stuff, or whatever it is they want to show. During this time, they also showed a music video performed by Tri B, who sings the theme song. And Tri B is, I really don't know much about them, but I know they're a girl group. I mean, obviously, I know that because I watched the music video. But even before that, I knew that they were a K-pop girl group. And as for the song, I don't really like it that much. I like the snippet that they used for the We Baby Bears opening. Speaking of the opening, by the way, I love the animation. It's really cute and it looks really good, and it's just nice to look at. Plus the song itself is cute and catchy, which is nice. But the full song, I didn't really like it. It's just not my cup of tea, I guess. Not that it really matters, because, I mean, the part of it that they did use I like, so that's good. I don't remember exactly what I said in my last video about We Baby Bears, but the first episode did lay out a premise for the show, and one thing I wasn't expecting is for the show to have a narrator, which is interesting. I'm not really sure how I feel about the narrator. They're just kind of there for now. I liked them in one episode because I felt like it was fitting with the theme, but I'll get into that more later. And one thing I feel a little bit bad about saying, but it's just how I feel, I don't really like the anime style that they're using for the show. I don't dislike it, but it's just not for me, I guess. I'm just not a big fan of it. I don't know if it's because it's a lot sillier or goofier, or maybe I just don't like that style that much anymore. I don't know. I'm hoping it'll grow on me, but we'll have. And now I will talk about the episodes. I'm not actually sure if I watched the episodes in chronological order. I saw the first episode first, I know that for sure, since that lays out the premise of the show. But on my rewatch, I noticed that the episodes are being aired in a different order than the ones that I first watched them in, and I think I caught a second airing of the episodes when I first watched it anyway, so I don't know if the order I watched it in was the right order, but I'll just go episode by episode in the order that I watched them. Okay, so for this first episode, I don't remember all the details, but I'll just get to the important parts. Basically, we learn that the bears have been living with the tenant, but they get kicked out for being a bit of a nuisance. After fantasizing about a home where they could stay, Grizz makes a wish on a shooting star, and a magical box appears, which Ice Bear can apparently communicate with. So the box takes them to another world, where they end up in a cave full of mushrooms, and eventually they find a bunch of little fairies. They ask the fairies if they can live there, and the fairies are very friendly and nice and say that they can. So then we have a short montage of fun. So one thing leads to another, and the bears end up cooking for the fairies, using the mushrooms from the cave. When the fairies find out that the mushrooms are from the cave, they get upset because apparently that was their currency, so now they're all broke. The fairies attack the bears, but Ice Bear is able to fend them off until they capture Panda. Grizz yells at Panda to play some K-pop from his phone because it was established earlier in this episode. I just didn't mention it, but the fairies don't like K-pop. The music scares off the fairies, and the bears leave, ready to move on to their next destination, wherever that is. So I'm gonna be honest, I did not really like this first episode, which wasn't a great sign for the rest of the show, but at the same time, like I said in the last video I made about We Baby Bears, the first episode to me is always going to be a bit weird compared to the rest of the show, especially as it goes on and changes, so I'm not going to hold it against the show too much. But the reason I didn't like it was because there was just a whole lot crammed into this 10 minutes. There was just a whole lot of things going on in this episode. So the bears are getting kicked out from their current home, then they have a fantasy about their new home, then they make a wish on a star and get a box, and then they end up in another world with a bunch of fairies, and then they make the fairies mad. And something similar happens in the rest of the episodes, but the difference is that all of them take place in one setting, whereas this one took place in two different ones. And the issue with that is that we didn't really get to know the fairies that well. Like, none of the fairies stood out. There wasn't one fairy character. I don't even think any of them have names, they're just fairies. In the other episodes, there's at least one character that we get to know. They're named and they're important to the plot. But this episode is not like that at all, unfortunately. If anything, I think the tenant was the one that got the most character, but he really doesn't do anything other than kick the bears out. But yeah, I just didn't like how they stuffed a whole lot into this episode. Plus, I didn't think it was that funny either, but I'm not really sure if the comedy of the show is particularly funny, at least not to me. So for the second episode, which is titled Bears in the Beanstalk, Ice Bear communicates with the box, and the box tells them to look up into the sky if they want to find their new home or something like that. So Panda looks through his phone and he ends up downloading a Beanstalk app, which takes them to a diner with a giant named Craig. So Craig shows them around the kitchen, and he shows them a goose that he has, which he claims he got fair and square, although he says it extremely suspiciously. So the bears ask if they can stay with him, and he agrees. So the bears help him cook, and Craig says he's going to step out to close the shop. The bears get hungry, and Ice Bear wants an egg, so the bears go to the goose. While the bears are talking about how nice Craig is, the goose tells them that Craig is actually a jerk, and he kidnapped her and makes her lay eggs. The bears set the goose free. By the way, I don't remember what the goose's name is, I am sorry. Craig sees the goose escaping and tries to catch her. She does manage to fly away, however, Craig seems very upset. Craig transforms, or he has a design change. He gets really angry and his beard turns red and fiery looking, and the egg on his head explodes. He attacks the bears and they run away. They flush themselves down the toilet, but they fall through the sky. Luckily, the goose from earlier flies in to save them. They part ways with the goose and move on to their next location. So I actually like this episode a lot more than the first one. I like the setting more. The episode takes place in a fairy tale world, which I think fits in with the narrator that the show has. I don't know if the narrator fits in any other episode, but definitely in this one since it's more fairy tale themed. Also, the characters are more interesting. Like I said, there really weren't any characters in the first episode other than the bears and the tenants. The fairies were all just kind of a collective. They didn't have any individual personalities, which is fine because there was a bunch of them, but whatever. I already talked about all that. But Craig and the goose were a lot more entertaining. I actually really liked the goose. She seemed pretty cool. And Craig was a good antagonist, even though it was obvious from the start that he was pretty shady. I also liked Craig's transformation. I don't know what to call it, but when he gets mad and he gets that fiery beard and stuff, that was pretty cool. So I felt like he was actually pretty threatening since he's a giant. And I thought that was especially portrayed well when he first changes and then he kind of slowly turns to look at the bears. It gets a little sillier after that, but that's fine. It's fitting for the show. Also, I think when they're first introduced to the goose, Panda imagines him having glorious hair. And there's kind of an Utena reference. I thought that was pretty interesting. Also, I like that Craig says, or he laughs, egg, 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 like that's his laugh. But when he transforms, he says yolk, yolk, yolk. Just funny because, like I said, the egg on his head kind of exploded. Yeah, that was an interesting character quirk. So in the third episode, titled Boo Done It, the bears end up at a haunted house. They meet a bunch of different ghosts, and each ghost shows an interest in the magic box that they have. One ghost tries to use the box to go to Paris, but it doesn't work since he's not alive. At least that's what Grizz says. So the lights go out, and when they come back on, the box is missing. The bears decide to investigate, and since every ghost showed an interest in the box, everyone is a suspect. Panda and Ice Bear find a secret safe with a bunch of salt in it. Grizz is off investigating by himself, and he discovers that the butler is the one that took the box. The butler possesses Grizz and plans to use the box to escape. Ice Bear and Panda show up and try to use the salt to free Grizz, but the butler just... One of the ghosts, the older woman ghost, demands that the butler let go of Grizz's body, but the butler tells them that he's sick of being bossed around by them. Ice Bear and Panda try to get through to Grizz in hopes of Grizz freeing himself from the control of the ghost. Grizz has control of his body again, and he buys the bears enough time to use the salt to free him. So the butler is destroyed. The other ghosts apologize for basically causing all of this to happen since they treated the butler poorly, and the bears leave. This episode was okay. I liked it more than the first episode, but I didn't like it as much as Bears in the Beanstalk. The plot was a little weird. So we have a mystery at the beginning of the episode, and the title would suggest that it'd be a mystery episode, but not a lot of time is spent on the mystery. Grace finds out pretty early on that the butler was the one that took the box. Plus, we don't spend a lot of time with the other ghosts to even suspect them other than their basic motivation when they showed interest in the box at the beginning of the episode. And when Grizz does discover it's the butler, that's when all the action begins. That being said though, I did like that part of the episode where the butler possesses Grizz. It was a cool looking sequence, so I really liked that part. But other than that, I didn't really like the characters all that much. They were alright. I feel like we didn't really get to know any of them. The butler got the most to do. One thing I thought was pretty cool was when Grizz was investigating, he finds a bunch of different VHS tapes. I forget if they're VHS tapes or DVDs, but on the cover of one of them, you can see Ranger Tabes in the corner, so that was a cool cameo. For the 4th episode, the Little Merbear, the bears find themselves on a beach. The bears find some birds kissing. Grizz says that romance is gross, but Panda loves romance. And somehow, someway, Panda ends up falling into the ocean. A mermaid shows up and saves him, and he's smitten by her. She takes them to her house via bubble, but she tells them that they can't live there since eventually that bubble is gonna pop and they'll drown. Panda's sad, but she does tell them that there is a way that they can live there. She shows them a clam, which uses a magic pearl to turn them into merbears. Grizz and Ice Bear grow a mermaid tail, but Panda gets a fish face. Grizz, Ice Bear, and Farah, the name of the mermaid, which I forgot to mention earlier, laugh at Panda, and Panda wants to transform again to look more like Ice Bear and Grizz, but Farah tells him that the clam needs to rest. So Ice Bear and Grizz are having fun on their new mermaid bodies with Farah, but Panda unfortunately isn't having any fun. Panda decides to sneak off to go see the clam to transform him again, but when he wakes up the clam sees his face and starts laughing, accidentally swallows the pearl. While Panda manages to get the pearl out of him, it ends up shooting through the window and getting stuck in a pit full of stingrays. Or was it manta rays? I don't know, whatever, some kind of predator fish. By now, Grizz, Ice Bear, and Farah have seen all of this, and Farah warns Panda that it's too dangerous to... Panda goes anyway, and he manages to get the pearl back without getting injured or dying. But Panda drops the pearl and it shatters, transforming Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear back to their normal bear forms. They start drowning now that they're underwater and they don't have gills anymore, but a mysterious fish saves them. The fish tells them that she's actually Farah, and she used the pearl to transform into a mermaid because she wasn't happy with what she looked like. Panda apologizes to Farah since he accidentally destroyed the pearl, but she tells them that she's happy to be in her old form and that she was inspired. So she kisses Panda goodbye, and the bears head off to their next destination. So I really liked this episode. I thought it was cute, and I really liked the ending. Plus Farah was a fun character. She was sweet and friendly, and I liked that she didn't hide anything from the bears. When she first showed them the pearl, I was a little suspicious because it seemed like it was a too good to be true type of thing, like there'd have to be some kind of catch. But that wasn't the case at all. The clam turned them into mermaids, and it wasn't even a permanent change. They could turn back, or seemingly transform again after the clam had rested a bit. And while the clam didn't do much, when Panda woke them up from their sleep, and they just started laughing at Panda, I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty... Plus, I thought Panda's fish form was the cutest. I liked his fish face, but maybe that's just... But back on the ending, I really liked it. It was a nice quiet moment, which this show really doesn't have a lot of quiet moments. It feels like something's always going on at all times. This episode is obviously inspired by The Little Mermaid, except with the less tragic ending. But all things considered, it would be very strange for this show to have a tragic ending. In the 5th episode, titled Modernish Stone Age Family, the bears end up in a world with... Okay, this is another episode that I kind of zoned out on, so I'll do my best with the synopsis. But if I make any mistakes, please forgive me. So the world reminds the bears of a TV show called Fossil Folks, which Panda tries to play on his phone, although it buffers. They end up meeting a family of cave people, and they ask if they can live with them. The mom of the cave family, who's also the one who gets the most lines and I assume is sort of the leader, gives them the okay to stay. The bears end up telling them about TV, and they're pretty curious about it, so Panda tries to show them the Fossil Folks show on his phone, but unfortunately... So the bears decide to show them TV by acting it out. They act out different shows, and they use a lizard as a remote. The family fights over the remote, and they don't notice that the baby has been kidnapped by a pterodactyl. The bears try to get the family to listen, but they're still caught up in their fight, so they go off to save the baby. They fight it out, and when Panda's about to get attacked by the pterodactyl, the cave family shows up to save them. Panda's phone finally stops buffering, and the pterodactyl, who is a father by the way, actually loves the fossil folks. Pterodactyl dad takes the phone and watches the fossil folks with his kids, and the cavemen apologize for their actions. But the bears also apologize for showing them TV in the first place, I think. They apologize for something. This was another okay episode. I feel bad because I feel like I didn't really pay that much attention to this episode. I lost interest in it, I guess. Pterodactyl Dad was a fun character, I think. He's probably my favorite of this batch of characters. Also, when they were acting out the television, I thought those jokes were pretty funny. But other than that, this episode was just okay. In the 6th episode, titled Excalibur, the bears end up in a vegetable world where all the villagers are vegetables. They meet one of the villagers named Lady Lima, and she shows them around the town. They notice a castle in the background, so they ask about it. She tells them about the kingdom and that whoever pulls the sword Excalibur from the stone will become the king. She takes them to the sword, and Grizz attempts to pull it out. Instead of pulling the sword out of the stone, he ends up just taking the sword while it's still embedded within the stone and just breaks the stone off of the ground. Despite this though, Grizz still becomes the king. Grizz starts acting like a jerk and is very selfish in his rule. Lady Lima, at least I think it's Lady Lima, tells him that one of the responsibilities as king is to help the people, so he asks some people what he can do, and he ends up sending Ice Bear to go fix a well. Ice Bear overhears villagers planning an attack on Grizz, so he goes to warn him, but the villagers are already there and are about to attack Grizz. Lady Lima steps in and gives them an inspirational speech about how they can fix the village together. Grizz tells her that she should be the queen. She pulls Excalibur out of the stone, and then she transforms and officially becomes the ruler. Then she exiles the bears, forcing them to leave. I'm not sure how I feel about this episode. I liked Lady Lima. She was cool. I mean, she was mostly just nice, and that was kind of it. I think the story was predictable. It's kind of obvious that Lady Lima was going to end up ruling in some way, or becoming a leader of some kind. I'm not sure if it's out of character for Grizz to be kind of a jerk. I mean, the power really got to his head, and he started acting very unlike Grizz. But like I've said before, I haven't seen every episode of We Bare Bears, so maybe this actually fits his personality, but to me it seemed kind of out of character. Even if it is out of character, this is a completely different show, and while the bears are based on the bears from We Bare Bears, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same or they're gonna be the same, if that makes sense. I liked Lady Lima's transformation sequence. That was fun. I feel like anytime a character in this show does some kind of transformation, it's cool. But to be honest, I don't really remember this episode all that well other than what I said. In the 7th episode, titled Meat House, the bears end up running into a medical clinic. They meet a doctor who appears to be human, and I think is the first human they've run into since they started world hopping. They ask him if they can live there, but he yells at them and kicks them out. The bears meet Squatter Otter, who tells them a bit about Squatter. They decide to go with him on his search for a new home. Although Panda is... They discover a house made out of meat in the woods. Since no one appears to be living there, they take up residence. Squatter Otter and the bears eat a whole lot of meat, but Panda is a vegetarian and doesn't eat any. Squatter Otter, I don't know if I should call him Squatter Otter or just Otter. Anyways, he tries to pressure Panda into eating meat, but Panda doesn't give in. Squatter Otter, Ice Bear, and Grizz turn into meat, and it's up to Panda to save them. He tries his best to help them, but realizes that he needs to take them to the doctor if he wants to save them. Panda isn't strong enough, but the can of veggies that he got from the fridge earlier, which I totally forgot to mention, I'm sorry, reminds him of why he is a vegetarian in the first place. Panda has a flashback to when he was a newborn and being fed by his mother, and that gives him the strength to bring his brothers and Squatter Otter to the doctor. The doctor is able to cure the bears, and Squatter Otter apologizes to Panda for being a bit of a jerk earlier. Panda accepts his apology, and the bears head out to their next destination. This was another episode that I'm not 100% sure how I feel about, although talking about it has given me a better appreciation of it, I guess. I don't like that Squatter Otter was so rude to Panda, but at the same time, he did apologize in the end. With that being said though, I did like Squatter Otter as a character. He just seemed pretty chill when he wasn't being so rude to Panda, and he wasn't being that bad, I guess. But I like his personality, and I thought he was pretty fun. I also thought the plot was interesting. I feel like this episode was sort of based on Hansel and Gretel a bit. The bears going off into the woods and finding a house made of food. But there wasn't really an antagonist, so I'm not really sure what that house was doing there. Because it did curse the bears and turn them into meat, so I guess we can assume that somebody was gonna eat them or something was gonna eat them. This episode also reminded me of that Invader Zim episode where Zim and Dib turn into meat, especially Grizz since he turned into a weenie. I think my favorite joke of this episode would be after the can of veggies gives that speech to Panda and Panda crushes him to, eat the veggies. I thought that was so funny. I felt bad for the poor can since it obviously screamed since it was in a lot of pain. So yeah, that was a bit of a mess. I guess I actually really like this episode now that I think about it. In the 8th episode, titled Pirate Parrot Polly, the bears end up in the middle of the ocean. Grizz fishes up a map, but their box springs a leak. A pirate named Polly saves them, and they want to become pirates like her. She doesn't want them to join her crew, but after they show her the map, she's convinced to let them join. Grizz ends up piloting the ship. They see a whirlpool ahead. However, Polly refuses to turn around. However, Polly orders Grizz to just keep going, and they end up getting sucked in, and the ship gets destroyed. The bears and Polly end up on an island where they find a cave, the same cave that is on the map. Panda sees the sign that says that the cave is cursed and tells Grizz and Polly, but Polly refuses to back down. Grizz and Panda fight, and Panda and Ice Bear decide to stay behind while Grizz and Polly go explore the cave. While exploring, Grizz and Polly activate a trap. Grizz tries to get them out of there, but Polly refuses to leave and reveals that she has left her crew behind in the past. Polly is knocked out, and Grizz tries to save them both, but he needs to be saved by Panda and Ice Bear. Polly apologizes to the bears and she tells them about her backstory. Polly used to be a parrot to a pirate captain who was searching for treasure, but the pirate captain never found it and she passed away. So Polly decided to take up the search by herself. And through all of this, Polly realizes that her crew's lives are more important than the treasure. They part ways, and that ends the episode. This was an okay episode. The first time I watched it, I didn't really like it all that much. I thought it was okay, but I did really like the ending, and I think the second time I actually liked the episode a bit more. As a character, I wasn't the biggest fan of Polly. She was alright, just not one of my favorites of this show. I really wasn't expecting her backstory though. I actually liked that part the most, I think, of this episode. Her backstory actually makes her actions make more sense. She loved her pirate captain, so of course she would take on the mantle, even if it means putting her own life in danger. One gag that I really thought was funny was that the phone made some faces while they were drowning, like it was also scared. I thought that was pretty funny. Also, the action sequences in this episode were pretty cool. Other than that though, this episode to me was kinda meh. So in the 9th episode, titled Baby Bear Genius, the bears end up at a prestigious school called IQP. All the students are kids like them, and they meet, I think her name is Bleep Bloop. I'm just gonna call her Monida though, because that's who she reminds me of. Monida tells them about the school, and she scans their brains for the entrance exam. Grizz and Panda both fail, but Ice Bear manages to pass. I say manages to pass, it's more like he passes with flying colors. Ice Bear doesn't want to attend the school without Panda and Grizz. Grizz and Panda try to encourage him to go anyway. He settles on just taking. While they're touring the school, Ice Bear impresses some of the other students, and the president learns that Ice Bear has an even higher score than he does, and he challenges him to a science contest. Ice Bear and the president present their inventions, and the president's invention drains the brains of Grizz and Panda. Ice Bear does end up winning the battle though, and when he wins, he becomes the president of the school. One of the changes he makes is to change the entrance exam, so it judges a person's character and personality instead of just whatever it scanned before. Ice Bear then chooses to go with his brothers off to search for a home, and they leave. This is another episode where I'm not really sure if I like it or not. One thing I really liked is that Grizz and Panda, despite failing the exam, they weren't jealous or upset that Ice Bear passed. They were actually really supportive of him and told him that he should attend the school since it's such a good opportunity. As for the characters, I liked Monida. She was fun, I guess. The president was a jerk. He was kind of boring, to be honest. I mean, he was pretty typical jerkish, but that's okay. But yeah, I liked Monida. I feel like they did some fun gags with her. Like when Panda and Grizz were just pushing her screen to get access to random information. Also, I like that when the other students are chanting Iceberg for President, it reminded me of a viral video, which I believe is the second episode of We Bare Bears, when Grizz posted the video and he was putting hashtags on there. One of the hashtags that Iceberg wanted was Iceberg for President. Well, that's the only hashtag he wanted, but I thought that was kind of a fun reference, if that was a reference.
Hashtag holla.
Hashtag panda single.
Hashtag Ice Bear for President.
In the 10th episode, titled Bug City Sleuths, the bears end up in Bug City. While exploring the city, they get scared off by a spider person because they all have preconceived notions that spiders are gross and scary. They then run into Mayor Centipede, who tells them that there's tons of jobs to be had in the city. The bears aren't interested in any of the jobs, but they do notice a poster for some missing silkworms. Mayor Centipede tells them not to worry about that and crumbles up the poster. She then leaves, telling them to vote for her. The bears assume that the spider person they saw earlier was the one that kidnapped the silkworms, so they decide to follow. They follow him to the laundromat, to the barber's, and to a restaurant. The bears end up following a trail that leads them to a warehouse, I think, where they find the silkworms. They get caught up in a web, and that's when the spider shows up. The spider frees them and tells them that he is trying to catch the culprit too, and he is actually a private investigator. Mayor Centipede shows up and reveals that she's the one that kidnapped the silkworms, and she's forcing them to make clothes for her. The spider detective tries to catch her, but she manages to escape. They follow the silkworms trail, and they catch up to Mayor Centipede. She tries to frame the bears, but Panda takes out his phone, and it turns out he was recording their conversation. Mayor Centipede is arrested, and the silkworms are reunited with their mother. The spider detective, who I really don't remember if they gave his name out or not, which is, I feel really bad about that, but yeah, he invites them to join his firm, but they decline. This is probably my favorite episode of the batch of episodes that they gave us. I think the spider detective is my favorite side character so far. He was just a really cool guy, and he was nice to the bears, plus he got to have some cool action scenes with the centipede. I feel like the plot itself is pretty predictable. Like, of course the spider guy was a red herring, and I don't even know if I'd call him a red herring. The bears just assume that he kidnapped them because he's a spider. The only moment where you kind of suspect that it's him is when the bears get caught up in a web, but I mean, he reveals immediately after that he's not the one that captured the. But yeah, this episode also had a good lesson that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, I guess. Or you shouldn't have preconceived notions of people and judge them before you actually meet them. It's a pretty basic lesson, but an important one that a lot of people don't really follow. Also, I liked Mayor Centipede. She was pretty cool. Although, if anything, I feel like centipedes are scarier than spiders, so the fact that the bears just immediately trusted her was, I don't know, something I would not do. I guess maybe I would trust her, but I'd be more scared of her than this. I also really liked Bug City. I think it was a cool setting, and all the bugs looked really nice. It was just a fun world. Probably my favorite, honestly. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about all of those episodes. Overall, I feel like the show is very hit or miss for me. Some episodes I really liked, and some I just didn't. The episodes that I liked a lot. And the episodes I didn't like, which really the only episode I didn't like was the first episode, I didn't like it. And the other episodes were just kind of meh. So I'd say it's a decent show. At least it's okay. My favorite episode of this batch would definitely have to be the Bug City Sleuths episode. I really liked that world, and I liked the characters as well. Well, the premise of the show and even the side characters are a lot sillier than in We Bare Bears, although We Bare Bears did have some silly characters and some silly episodes. Most of them are enjoyable. I think for me in this show, if a side character isn't that interesting or is kind of boring or I just don't like them, then I'm probably not going to like the episode because that side character is going to be featured a lot in the episode and they're going to be involved in the plot in some form. I honestly wonder if we're going to see any of them again because I really liked the goose and the spider detective, and Lady Lyman was cool, Pharaoh was cool. I wouldn't be upset if we saw them again, but I also don't know why they would show up or how, but I wouldn't be upset if we got to see them. Okay, so while I was working on the video, I did catch the most recent 2 new episodes, and one thing I thought was interesting is that, oh gosh, I don't remember what the episode was called. The one with the foxes, #1fan or something like that. But in that episode, the antagonist seemed to indicate that she'd make a return, because at the end of the episode she says that she's going to do whatever it takes to get back at the bears. So it seems like we're going to see her again, and it makes me wonder if we're going to see any of the other characters that were in these other episodes again too. We shall see. I just wanted to add that before I ended the but I am curious to see what happens next. I'm wondering if the show's gonna get a season 2 and if anything's gonna change or if it's gonna continue to be the bears just world hopping. I'm not really sure. What do you guys think of this show? Let me know in the comments. I'm not sure if I'm gonna talk about this show more in the future. I might if there's an episode that really stands out to me, but for now I'm probably just gonna leave it at this. Anyways, thank you guys for watching.